Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Shop Thursday. You better have a big cup of coffee in front of you, as it's cold out here. It's in the 30s. It is chilly and it's windy, breezy. That's why I'm all bundled up today. And I'm all bundled up too because of the words that I read from. It's an alternate Old Testament reading that we could use for today. It's Joel. The prophet Joel, real small prophet, considered one of the minor prophets because he didn't go on and on and on. It wasn't long-winded like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. No, short, to the point. Joel, and our passage that we're reading is chapter 2, verses 23 through 32. Now, if you were just to read this part, you would think, hey, things are going pretty cool. Joel's breaking out into a happy dance. Look at this. O children of Zion, be glad and rejoice in the Lord your God. For he has given the early rain for your vindication. He has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the later rain, as before. And look at this. The threshing floors shall be full of grain. The vats shall overflow with wine and oil. In other words, everything is awesome. It's hunky-dory. But if you just read that and you haven't read what came before it, you're missing the whole point of what this passage is about. Because when you turn back to the beginning of Joel and you see what's going on here, it's heartrending. It starts out, it's a lament. Hear, O elders, give ear to all the inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this ever happened to us before? What do you mean? I mean, the whole land is desolate. It's swarming with locusts. That's what it's talking about, a locust plague. And it's describing it as being like this mighty army that's just sweeping over, and it's nothing but mass destruction everywhere in front of it. And it's so bad. It's so bad. All the farmers, it says, be dismayed, you farmers. Wail, you vine dressers. Over the wheat and the barley, for the crops of the field are ruined, and the vine withers, the fig tree drops. I mean, it just goes on and on. All this bad stuff that's happening. And even the cows are just running loose now, trying to find something to eat. And it talks about even the wild animals. Their wild pastures are absolutely ruined. And there's a wildfire that's going on in the area too. Everything. This plague of locusts just absolutely destroyed the people. But as we finish up reading the book of Joel, you're going to also say, wait a minute, are we talking about a real actual plague of locusts because it's being described as an army? Or is the prophet talking about the armies of the Babylonians or the Assyrians that had come down and destroyed the land? See, this could be one giant metaphor, but quite possibly it was also literal. There was a locust plague, and I think that could be what's going on here. But all the way through these opening verses of Joel, we have words that are very, very familiar to us. How about this? Blow the trumpet in Zion. Sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. For the day of the Lord is coming. It is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick blackness. Oh, we've seen that stuff before, right? Yeah. And some of these words are even familiar from our Lenten observances, especially on Ash Wednesday. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the aged, gather the children and even infants at the breast. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her canopy. And all priests and pastors, you get down there too, This is a giant fast. We're all going to sit in ashes and sackcloth and repent. Repent because this was all seen as judgment upon the people. Whether it was a swarm of locusts or an army of invaders or both, they were all seen as God's judgment on the people. And one of the things that Joel is saying is, how can this be, God? It is a cry of lament. Are you going to let this happen to us so that the other nations can just laugh at us and say, hey, look at what your God does for you? Nothing. Just lets you run into ruin and destruction. And this is a giant lament that Joel is pushing out. But now let's get to our passage for today, because it is interesting when it talks about the children suddenly being called, come on, children of Zion, meaning all you people, come on, let's celebrate, because things have turned around. God has looked on our destitute, has looked on all of our issues, our problems, the way everything's in ruins, and he has begun already. Look, he's given us the early and the later rains. Now, the early rains, those are fall, because that was the first part of the year for the Jewish calendar. And so those rains that came during the autumn months, they would have everything to do with the moisture being reinvigorating the ground for the early planting of the spring. And then you have those early rains of the spring too, to keep things going. And it's going on and on and on, praising God for the goodness that he's given to the people now that things are all right again. But here's where it really gets interesting. Here we have that ends our reading for this Sunday. If we use this for an alternate reading, it says here, once all that has happened, once God has restored his creation out there in nature, and for all the plants and the animals and birds and all that stuff here, then afterward, these are very familiar words, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female slaves in those days, I will pour out my spirit. Where have we heard that before? Every single year. Yep, Pentecost. Peter pulling out this passage and saying, what you see before you right now, as God's Spirit is being poured out upon the people there in Jerusalem, this is after the resurrection of Jesus, the Spirit is poured out. And people are talking in all these different languages that they don't even know. And that talk is all proclamation about the wondrous love of God, and how Jesus died on that cross for you and for me, and now how his love is poured out upon us, and his Spirit is being poured out upon us. And yeah, Peter was reading from the book of Joel when he said those things. Or I'll bet you he probably had it memorized. He's probably just standing up there and saying, hey, what you see happening before you, here it is, right there. Joel talked about it. And it ends up this way. I will show portents in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors shall be those whom the Lord calls. So in other words, this Spirit that's being poured out upon all flesh, not just a certain little group of people, but all flesh. This Spirit comes in the last days. Peter is saying we're living in the last days, folks. We've been living in them for the last 2,000 years. But it's a wonderful time to be alive. Oh yeah, are there bad things that are still happening? Yeah. Blood and fire and columns of smoke, the sun turned to darkness, and the moon to blood. All that imagery, that apocalyptic imagery of what will be happening at the end. It's gruesome stuff, but it's been happening. It's been happening all through our history, and yet it is God's Spirit that's also happening to you and to me. Very, very powerful words from this book of Joel. And there's even more in there too. So read it. Read the whole thing. It's a quick read. It's short. It's only 3 chapters long, maybe 4. I can't remember now. But it's a beautiful, concise picture of how God has rescued us, you and me, from the clutches of despair and of death, and has given us life through His Spirit. Okay, bundle up today. It's going to be cool. But you know what I heard? The temperature up in our area, in our neck of the woods, could be hitting the 70s again this weekend. Awesome. Great time to get out and rake up those leaves. God's blessings be with you.